that good. They're 19th in the NHL on home ice.
And with that hit, the fans fell silent. In one split second, hockey violence jumped back into the headlines last night. This hit on Montreal Canadian Max Pacioretty left him with a broken vertebra and a severe concussion. Of course, this is just the latest in a series of high-profile headshots in hockey. Despite months of debate, hits like this are still a dangerous part of the game. I'm joined by Andrew Rodger. He's a columnist with thehockeywriters.com and resident writer for the NHL Alumni Association, and Andrew joins me from Ottawa. We just watched that hit. I'm sure you've seen it several times yourself, Andrew. What immediately comes to mind when you see it?
It's disturbing to see something like that, because we know hockey is a high-impact sport, but we're also, looking at a human being and a life outside of hockey, and to see that level of impact, it's really hard to watch more than once.
Okay, last night's event raises more questions about the role of these kinds of hits in hockey. What can reasonably be done to prevent incidents like this?
Well, I think a lot of the players that I've spoken with, the key word that you hear a lot is respect, where there needs to be more respect amongst the players for each other and their own well-being. But I was speaking with one friend of mine who's a longtime veteran in the American Hockey League, and he was saying that 99% of the guys out there aren't out to hurt anyone. It's just that it's such a high-impact sport that things happen, and it's really unfortunate when we see a consequence. Like we had last night.
All right, here's the question. Who's responsible for this then? Is it the player who launched the hit, or is it the way the game is played itself?
Well, there's a bit of a debate about that, actually. It's been ongoing as more and more of these hits take place. Clearly, the player that is throwing the hit, certainly the majority of responsibility falls on him. Just because you have a guy lined up doesn't mean you need to hit him with the speed of a freight train. But we're also seeing more and more, to some degree, players leaving themselves in a vulnerable position. Now, that wasn't necessarily the case last night, but we are seeing sort of that mix. So the majority of it falls on the hitter, but all players need to be aware of where they are on the ice and who's on the ice with them as well.
Yeah, but this conversation extends to, Sidney Crosby is still out with a concussion. He's missed 24, 25 games. His sister is out with a concussion, as we found out, also, or has suffered a concussion. And then we hear that there is a brain trauma on some of these players. We're finding out can cause a disease called CTE, chronic traumatic brain injuries, so which can lead to all sorts of problems for players. So how likely is this to have any impact on the league to change the rules?
Well, the league has been slow in some ways to react. They've had the opportunity in the past to hand out more severe suspensions, and that's what's really going to get the message through when we start seeing double-digit suspensions for some of these hits. A lot of times we see 2 games or 4 games, and that'll certainly impact the team. But to really send the message, we need to see more of a 10 and 15 game suspensions, because as you mentioned, with something like CTE, this goes well beyond your playing career, and the Sports Legacy Institute in the United States has done a lot of research on this, and seeing it more with NFL players currently, but they haven't examined as many NHL players. But we're starting to see athletes in their 40s and 50s suffering from degenerative brain issues and depression, and in some cases even suicide. So this is very, very serious, possibly even an epidemic of concussions that we're on the edge of here.
When will we hear about the league's decision dealing with the Boston Bruins player who launched this hit last night?
Well, they had their meeting at noon today, I believe. It was scheduled to be done by telephone. We could probably expect an announcement later today, but under the rules of the collective bargaining agreement, if it's not an in-person session with the disciplinary committee, if it's done over the telephone, the maximum suspension would be 5 games. So I think in this case we'll see anything probably from 2 to 4 games in this situation.
Do you think that's enough?
Oh, that's a tough question. In this case, I think it is. Chara needs to be aware of what he's doing. He does bear responsibility in this, but it's much different. This was sort of a hockey play was taking place. He was scrambling, he was caught out of position, and it's much different from some of the other scenarios where we see a player's head being specifically targeted, as we saw as the case with Trevor Gillies, I guess it was last month in the game against the Pittsburgh Penguins, and he received a 10-game suspension for that.
All right, we'll leave it there, and we'll look forward to finding out what the league is going to do today. Hockey columnist Andrew Rodger, thank you for joining me from Ottawa today. Appreciate it.
Oh, pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Okay.